Cool. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having us on again. I've had a few other friends join this evening, so try and bring them in as well. I mean, from my perspective in Asia, Asia's been pretty fast to bounce back or pretty unaffected by the pandemic across a multitude of the markets. And I can get Hyuk-tae to talk about Korea in particular and something on China, and Elvin, who's joined tonight to replace Neil from Cinemas, can talk about Indonesia, where the effect is probably more profound but not talked about. I've also had my friend Hervig join, who invests widely in Vietnam, and he can bring in some perspective on how that's affected operating businesses that he's involved in there. Yeah, just in brief context, recovered well from COVID, but sitting in Singapore, we feel certainly as an expat in Singapore, we feel very isolated from the world. And speaking to people in the US, who are saying, well, we'll come out to Asia and the rhythm of meeting people face to face will restart. We talked about that last night. I'm not sure it will restart in Q3, even Q4 of this year, certainly for Singapore. We wait and see with bated breath. And yet it's creating lots of interesting opportunities around things like healthcare, looking at healthcare from the perspective of venture capital and private equity, and looking to mature markets and how to bring technologies into Asian markets and expand them out where there's huge population growth. I think population is one of the other big drivers, and the advent of mass urbanization, which is represented in the growth of super apps across Southeast Asia like Grab and Gojek, and the e-commerce drivers and fintech domain that they deliver. With that, I mean, probably without much more ado, I pass on to maybe Hyuk-tae first, who can talk about Korea, a bit more about North Asia, and some of the trends that he's seeing there around urbanization and transportation, and also I think another big factor is food security, and how we become more sustainable. I guess sustainability has been the big watchword that's risen out of COVID, and sustainable food supply, be that venture driven or be that traditional agriculture, where I know that Elvin can also talk about Cinemas is one of the largest sort of agri-food related businesses through its palm oil divisions, but also co-ops with a number of the big food groups in Indonesia and other markets. And I think that's a big factor as well. Population growing rapidly in Asia, and how will they be fed in the next 10 and 20 years? So Hyuk-tae, perhaps you want to talk a bit about Korea?
Hi, good to see you all again from yesterday. For those of you who aren't there yesterday, my name is Hyuk-tae, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Klein Venture Partners. We're a multifamily office based out of Singapore. We're an office in Seoul, South Korea as well. As you can see, I am South Korean, grew up in Canada and worked in Japan, China, Singapore, US. I finally sort of settled here. And now with Rob, I'm kind of stuck in this island for the foreseeable future. But we have been investing in the general tech industry for about last 10 years, managing Korean family money, as well as some of Hong Kong and Singapore family offices, families of wealth as well. We're mainly investing in early to growth stage companies, tech companies in Asia, and we cover South Korea, Greater China, and Southeast Asia out of Singapore. So yeah, some of the key trends that we have seen, and we want to identify companies that are solving real big problems. And urbanization continues to be a big theme. For example, the case of South Korea, Seoul and the nearby cities still represent about 1/4 of the population, and I think it's going to stay that way. Single household in South Korea is another big trend that we're watching. People are getting married late or not getting married at all. and therefore the subset of trends I see in pet adoption or pet industry in general, pet consultation is booming. E-commerce subverticals. So there are some big winners, as you'll see with Coupang going IPO in the US, but there are multiple other a subset of very specialized e-commerce that's doing really well. And we're seeing them growing by 50 to 70% year on year. Delivery, food delivery, all kinds of deliveries. Koreans are very impatient, so we need to get it delivered under 1 hour. Otherwise, we're going to get very upset. Laundry, again, we don't have a big space. Again, with the single household, we don't want to buy these big laundry and dry machines. So having it, again, done by delivery is important. Lifestyle. Also, a lot of the young people are very conscious of their investment, the wealth management, and they want to do it over digital, not face to face. So it's another thing. With that single household trends, the aging population is another big problem. So we're watching at the healthcare services and technology quite closely. Again, related, but low birth rate is another big problem. But if of those, kids that are born, the willingness of parents to spend money for good education, all kinds of good services is rising. So again, we're an early stage investor of Ping Pong Baby Shark, which is a Korean company that has gone global. We're seeing a lot of attention spent on bringing these good content. I want to talk about two more companies that we see in Singapore, which is the largest indoor vertical farm here in Singapore that's solving the food security problem in Singapore as they import most of the foods from overseas. So yeah, we see a bit of a trend happening in North Asia, which can trickle down to Southeast Asia. We want to find a good management team who can solve those problems and move within Asia, as well as export some of these technology to overseas. So another Singaporean company that we have invested is doing very well in the US called Igloo company that's doing smart locks that's deploying to Amazon Seattle. They just signed a partnership with AT&T. They deploy with the NAR, National Association of Realtors, as well as Airbnb in the US for managing access and home doors through smart locks. So there are some of these Southeast Asian winners that are going to do well within Pan Asia as well as in the US and Europe. So happy to share ideas if you want to know more about these companies that are solving big problems.
You got yellow carded about 2 minutes ago, so your football investment is now in the red.
Well, anybody have a quick question for Tay?
I have a quick question on that company Ping Fong, which my daughter is a big fan of. How did that catch on globally? What was the strategy there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, happy to share some of the links. Wall Street Journal covered it, ABC covered it, BBC covered it. So there's a lot of reporting that has been done that makes would it be more fun than me talking about it. But I knew when we invested, they're already doing very well in Korea. I know that they were onto something big because a lot of Korean celebrities were doing cover for free on their Instagram, on their YouTube. This is a very catchy song, very interesting. Vibrant colors, big subtitles, repetitive moves. But they were the first one who put these content for free in YouTube when YouTube was really just emerging as the alternative to TV stations. It was a bold movement for them because they already had a very, very good, sticky, paid mobile app that was one of the most downloaded apps in South Korea, but they took a bold move to put all of their content for free on YouTube, but it really paid off. And I saw that there was an Indonesian celebrity that did a cover song, and the whole of Indonesia went crazy. All the policemen, firefighters, teachers started doing cover song. Went to Malaysia, Middle East, UK, and then next thing you know was in the US with the Ellen Show, James Corden Show, Stephen Colbert Show, which is quite rare thing for Asian-born content companies to do. But now there's a lot of trend like BTS and Blackpink also, they're doing well on the global stage. So I hope the trend continues.
Perhaps at that point I can bring in Elvin. I mean, Elvin, your conglomerate sort of investment vehicle that you represent is trying to do a little bit of the reverse, right? Invest in US late stage technology stocks and land and expand them into Asia, utilizing the strong roots that you've got throughout Indonesia. Gyuktae just referenced Indonesia. Perhaps you can give some insights to the folks listening on trends you see in Indonesia, the size of the market, and also a bit about, you know, what the conglomerate's got going on in the various tentacles of the business.
Sure. Thanks for the invite, Rob. So standing in for Neil, who unfortunately can't make it today. So I think regarding the first point, unfortunately, unlike Korea, right? Like unlike the Northeast Asian country, Indonesia, even though it's like 300 million people, okay, close to 300 million people, like supposedly the fourth largest market by population in the world, is still a developing market by far. Like, sure, for those of you who have been to Jakarta, you've probably seen like towering towers, Sinarmas Tower being one of the also the landmarks there. But it's very disparate. I'll say the income disparity due to like structural issues and political unrest that only cleared up in the past 30 years has gotten like made Greater Jakarta and like places like Surabaya or Bali, you know, whom maybe some of you are already like doing digital nomad stuff there, extremely well off. And so the average GDP per capita in these like centralized city states around minimum of 400 to 600 USD per month. So people make around that amount of money. So that puts it like above India, but it's a very, I guess, a very drastic difference from the case that India faces and other developing markets that have gotten like maybe in the capital markets like China has done that. There's a huge logistic cost if you so core products like e-commerce, you know, there's no way for Indonesia to literally build a Kupang just out of Kupang alone. That's not gonna be favorable on a gross margin level. Unlike Korea. So I think on that note, the fund that the group is actually setting up, a growth stage fund, is more to take innovations and business model that has done well in other markets to expand and in Southeast Asia. Because I think the case that, so I guess in Indonesia, the most successful companies, apart from the local Traveloka, Tokopedia, and Gojek, the one that actually has made it the best bottom line is C Group. So the one that owns Shopee, SEA Group, and they are like, you know, they have to subsidize their Indonesian operations even until to date from huge margins from gaming. So I think the whole genesis of the fund that moves it away to focus on growth stage companies coming into Indonesia is that you kind of have to have a profit center somewhere else, because that's the infrastructure issue is not gonna go away within, you know, the time frame that capital markets can expect. So like 2 to 5 years, it's very unlikely. Like taking for example another conglomerate, at Lipo Group, right? They actually successfully built this payment company called OVO that eventually got acquired by, like, merged or / acquired by Grab. Before the acquisition, it was burning hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and it couldn't stand on its own. So you have like, then Lipo Group is the one that kind of has to top it up. So it's always gonna be this burning thing, because the issue that we solve that Indonesia faces is I guess is a huge structural issue made worse by the thousands of islands, and so we have to rely on I mean, the whole point of a fund is not to, we're not an impact fund, you know, we're not a philanthropy organization. We have to deliver returns to stakeholders. So the time horizon of like 5-10 years, I think it's something that we're pretty mindful of. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Elton. And I just want to sort of, before we wrap up and ask for any other questions on particular insights on Asia, perhaps get a different perspective from Hervig, who's a European. You'd probably tell that by his name. He can give you a bit of background, but been based in Asia for quite some time, and also doing public markets and also private investments, and also quite a big focus on Vietnam, and working with capital out of sort of Central Asia as well. So Hervig, perhaps you want to give some particular insights on the Vietnam market opportunity and what you see in broader Asia in terms of liquid capital markets strategies and some of the things you're doing in commodities as well.
Right. So first off, Rob, thanks for inviting me, and I couldn't agree more with what Mark said at the beginning. I think there's literally opportunities everywhere. There's interesting funds and direct opportunities as well. So the background is that we had been looking at Vietnam for a while. We believe the macro context in Vietnam was particularly interesting. They were doing everything right, creating a legal framework that was interesting for international investors, attracting a lot of FDI and producing spectacular GDP growth. So we wanted to see if we could take advantage and buy into domestic stories that had upside potential. Initially, so we have a small Asian liquid markets equity fund. So initially we went through the fund and did investments in things like Vina Milk and other success stories that are well known, until we came across an interesting opportunity in one of our relations, invested in a big way in Vietnam since 2012, and was the big shareholder in the largest construction company in Vietnam. And so we looked in detail. There was a traditional activist campaign begging to happen. And the question was, can you actually get that done in Vietnam? Can you, as a minority shareholder, get your rights respected and change things for the better? So we spent about 18 months getting comfortable with the situation, both the context and the company, and then launched our campaign by buying 10% of this company. It was, as predicted, a rougher ride than we had foreseen, but ultimately we prevailed. And so we believe that Vietnam today, as can be seen from how they tackled COVID, and as they're the only country in the world that produced a positive GDP growth in 2020, we think Vietnam is going to be a spectacular opportunity to find returns in today's world. So we're large investors in Koticon. We've taken access or acceded to the board and started cleaning up ship, and have to be very grateful and mindful of the fact that actually Vietnam did everything and more than what they say in the textbook they were going to do. And so we launched a fight against a local strong guy, and ultimately he had to cave. So our view is, today in Vietnam, the largest construction company in Vietnam trades at 0.5 times book. We think this is going to be a sensational story over the next 5 years, not only because half of the planet wants to relocate their supply chain from China to Vietnam, but also because Vietnam is just extremely focused on getting out of the frontier market and acceding to the emerging market world, It's a 100 million people country, very ambitious, very entrepreneurial, very well educated, and driven by a guy who is taking all his lessons from Singapore and focused on eradicating corruption and making sure that foreign investors are being respected. And so today we are as a construction company talking to primarily actually Singaporean companies. The big developers in Vietnam, with the exception of Vin Homes, are the Singaporean companies, and every single one of them has as their major growth pole for development Vietnam. So we're very bullish.
So Hervik, I noticed you're an INSEAD alum. Todd, I'm going to connect some dots. Todd Rupert's on the investment committee of the for the endowment, and
I'm also on the board.
and we had connected to Rob through Amit Berman, and Amit's looking at a deal in Vietnam, as Todd tells me. But I don't know if Amit's on.
Yes, Amit and I know each other, and we're actively talking about Vietnam for sure.
Okay, well, fair enough. Rob, do you want to? I mean, this has been a great little tour, de force of Korea / Singapore, Indonesia, now Vietnam. Which, if I were to show you something, I have to go through these slides, but there's we were meant to be in Asia, and I didn't show. I was supposed to be in Vietnam last May. We were supposed to have our Singapore as our big anchor to go back through Asia. So we will be back. Any last thoughts, Rob, before we?
Oh, well, no, look, I'm just glad to be connected with all the 361 firm folks, and glad to also be able to give a bit more insight to Southeast Asia. Probably China gets most of the Asia inbound focus and focus outside of Asia, but we think that Southeast Asia, and those three markets, and perhaps Thailand as well. I wanted to get a Thai friend to join today, but he was unable to get on. But maybe next time we can cover Thailand and also Japan as well, and do the tour. And then when you guys can travel again, we can go and do the tour and drink all the regional cocktails.
Hey Rob, yeah. Can I ask a quick Vietnam question? This is Rob as well. I'm glad you mentioned supply chain. We talked about that yesterday. But are there any government holding requirements on deals that would restrict 51% ownership or anything like that in Vietnam?
Actually, yes, sure. With the exception of strategic industries being anything defense and anything energy, that restriction has now fallen away. But the reality on the ground is that many companies still have it in their charter. And so whilst it's no longer a requirement for most of the companies, it's still not a given that you can get more than 50% of your company.
Thanks.
So I wanted to turn, if I could, Doug Van, you're sitting in Hong Kong, somewhat active in mainland China.
Yeah, let me talk about Hong Kong / China. I think everybody knows that Hong Kong was haunted with protests and a lot of bad press in 2019 and early 2020. But since then, because of the security law, everything quieted down. And then, of course, COVID also came and drove everybody just to stay home, and nothing happened. This year, we're going to see a re-emergence of Hong Kong in the sense that China is letting a lot of Chinese companies to list here, partly because of New York seemingly not so welcomed. And I think the Chinese entrepreneurs, of course, before they know better, they're all driven to New York, because if you list in New York, you are a real big company, so to speak. Now, with the political issue, they're all coming back to Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is seeing a huge boom. And on top of that, the head of the stock exchange, who was from mainland China and very, very good at what he does, is retiring. And an Argentinian guy, a banker who used to work for JP Morgan, is taking over in May. And so his job is really to bring Hong Kong's image back up in the international investment community. The situation here is the same as, in a way, the same as everywhere else. And that is, for the listed companies, the traditional companies, PEs are tiny, low, 5, 6, and some of them have a high, very dividend yield because of the very low prices at the moment. And like everywhere else, the tech companies come up, they go crazy, and then they come down. And that's going to be the case, you know, in the foreseeable future, everywhere in the world, not just here in Hong Kong. So with the push of the Hong Kong government trying to reestablish Hong Kong, or to solidify Hong Kong as an investment base for everyone, with China's support behind it, and Hong Kong is, for example, looking at a 5-6% growth this year in 2021. How are they going to get there? I'm not sure, because we're not handing out money like other places, but you know, we are trying to make life easier by granting loans and so forth for the businesses. And China, of course, has long gotten away with having to lock down everybody and so forth because of the virus. The virus has come back in some ways, but it's very small in pockets, and they're using the strategy they used in Wuhan last year, which is immediately lock down that whole area until the virus is eradicated from the crowd there. So I think in a nutshell, the stock market is the place to go. Private equity, of course, it's also interesting because there's a lot of growth companies, but that, like everywhere else, you really have to know the people, the players, and it's a bit of a minefield. So I would not suggest people from the rest of the world to come in and try to look for private equity deals, although there are lots. And then with the amassing of wealth of the mainland Chinese in the last 20 years, if there are good deals, they share it amongst their friends right away. So this is why whenever there is a listing, a private, like initial listing, the stocks, which is typically only 20% of the company, the stocks are sold out like before the banks have a chance to go sell them. Everybody and their uncle and who's related and whatnot will get a piece of the action. So it's not up for the guy on the street to get it. And so I see 2021 as still a very good year, even though it will be really bumpy because Hong Kong will follow the bumps, particularly that of the US markets, and reacts to it. And this is like a place where people have a lot of money here, they put it on the table, they pull it off the table, and reaction is very fast. So all I can caution everyone is you have to be nimble, but don't be shy. I mean, I think the opportunities are wide open here across the board. And of course, you know, the tech space is very good, the healthcare space is very good, and even the traditional manufacturing space, a bit boring, but I think it's also safe and good. And that's kind of in a nutshell on Hong Kong.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Any questions on what he described?
I mean, just one comment. I thought it was interesting today. I was chatting on WhatsApp with a Singaporean family that's built a healthcare business, and he was saying, we're going to list in Hong Kong because we think the credentials for listing are better in Hong Kong than they are in Singapore. I was giving him a bit of stick about son of Singapore going to list in Hong Kong. Maybe the Singaporeans would be a bit upset about that. But I think you're right, Doug. You know, there's pretty resilient public markets in Hong Kong, and still a lot of appetite. And with the Chinese capital controls, much easier. Hong Kong's been a base for Chinese capital for a lot longer. Although we are seeing, trend-wise, quite a bit of influx of Chinese, but for that matter, Singapore is making a big play at the moment for lots of folks to come here. The new, you have to take with a pinch of salt what you read in the news, but obviously the reported advent of Sergey Brin's family office and James Dyson's family office to set up entities in Singapore, and they're making a big play for that at the moment.
Maybe I will add something here. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes, Mark.
Yes, and my name is Mariusz Gawroński. I work for Singapore's subsidiary of Harvest Fund Management. It's number 6 China's fund house. And what we do, we are in asset management, in external asset management. So I second what you just said. Hong Kong is going to have about 100 Chinese IPOs this year, raise more than 50 billion US dollars. We are getting allocations to it. We serve mostly China families, although I've been tasked with developing European business. And we are going to have every month quite a good IPO out of Hong Kong, a lot of China money coming in via Stock Connect. So the business is going to be good this year.
I agree.
Hey, Doug, it's Rob Colorini here. Just a quick question on the dynamic between Hong Kong, to Beijing. Because you have these competitors like a healthy competitor like Singapore, or even like the U.S. Listing bases, would you say the environment has grown warmer or kind of kept neutral here over the last couple of years?
The Chinese entrepreneurs, of course, initially up till I guess last year, when New York Stock Exchange threatened to throw them out, is that they offer for New York, even though it costs so much more to list in the US versus listing in Hong Kong. And because they want an international audience. They are very confident of what they have as a company, and they want to go from a domestic into a truly international, multinational one. So their aim is very high. But now with, I think, New York Stock Exchange kind of shooting himself in the foot because of Trump, most people are shying away because the government can decide that they will lock up all the accounts, no US dollar movement, and that will be wow. That's not possible. So what are the options? Nobody's going to London anymore. The option will be Hong Kong or Singapore, and to be a serious China player, Hong Kong is the place, not in Singapore.
Maybe what I can add here for the benefit of our non-Asian friends is that in Asia, we have a bit of a division of work, so to speak. I mean, definitely Hong Kong has much deeper pockets than Singapore. So in terms of investment banking, IPOs, definitely Hong Kong is a better place. But Singapore is still an independent country, a small country, but an independent country, and big chunk of the workforce works in finance industry, in investment industry. So the government is not gonna do anything funny here. People know about this. Private wealth knows about it. So in terms of private banking, Singapore is the Switzerland of Asia.
Yeah, and because of that, the Hong Kong government and therefore Beijing knows that they cannot make Hong Kong into really China, so to speak. And they have to be careful, and they have to continue to make Hong Kong to be as free as it is right now in terms of people and capital movement.
Can I add one more thing, Mark? Maybe on the Hong Kong side, that we also invested into a late stage Chinese tech. I've lived in China for 6 years, also studied at Peking University's, Beijing University's business school. We're expecting an IPO of DB Chuxing, which is the largest mobility company, which has bought out other mobility platforms around the world. But unlike Uber, where they have a homogeneous brand or globally, Didi would just financially gain. So yeah, we're expecting a good IPO for that, but we'll likely get listed in Hong Kong, maybe probably dual listing in Shanghai as well. And I think all the Chinese mega tech companies will follow the similar routes. So we're also investing into DJI, which is a consumer drones company. In a year or two, we expect them to do the same in Hong Kong, maybe a dual listing in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep it moving around. This has been great.
Mark,
Amit,
I can see
sorry?
that Amit joined.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to call on Amit, who looks with his beard looks a little different than his picture on the screen here.
Lockdown's been tough, my friend.
It's been tough. You're not alone there. But we did touch on Vietnam. We've touched on Indonesia, Hong Kong, and obviously Singapore and Korea. But you know, someone just said London. No one's going to London, but you're sitting in London, so maybe you give your perspective.
Well, on London or Vietnam?
Well, more both. You know,
both. I mean, ultimately, I think we are going to remain focused for global finance and the rest of it. The sheer infrastructure that you've got in place in London of investment banks, accounting firms, lawyers, all sat in one place, was always for me the reason why Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam were never going to be rivals to London, regardless of what happened to Brexit. I think the general optimism in this country on the back of a very, very successful vaccine rollout is going to infiltrate market sentiment. And I do think this economy will do fine, regardless of Brexit and the implications of it. So we as a house are increasingly looking at more investment opportunities in the UK on the back of this change in sentiment. So we're bullish on the economy, just in a way that we weren't necessarily a few years ago. So we think that there's definitely an investment play here. And as Mark knows, and Rob and Todd to some extent, we as an investment house are quite Asia focused as well. We're actually looking at a live deal in Vietnam at the minute. So I've kind of been spending quite a bit of time in the economy. I personally have done a lot of investments in the economy as well, where I used to be in Singapore for years. So very familiar with the healthcare, education, consumer space. And so it's a market that we've tracked for a long time. And it's obviously been outperforming the rest of the region for a long time as well. But the challenge has always been, how do you play that growth story? Getting registered to acquire shares on the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange is challenging, if not impossible. And most of the best companies aren't necessarily either listed, and they're mainly in private hands. So when the opportunity comes in to acquire something that allows you to play that space, we kind of jumped on it. Core reasons why we like Vietnam generally are, you know, it's, as I said, it's one of the fastest growing economies globally. As a country itself, it's positioned itself to focus on export oriented sectors, support to key industries. It's been moving up the value chain. It's been receiving a huge amount of inbound FDI from Chinese companies, Korean, Japanese companies, etc. So that's been driving the kind of the story behind the growth there. And uniquely, it's very good friends with both China and the US, despite having defeated both of those countries in wars. So I think there's a huge amount of respect that comes from those economies dealing with Vietnam. As I said, FDI has increased significantly, benefited from being very close to China, benefits from low labor costs, and very conducive trade agreements. 2010 to 2019, nominal GDP grew at about 9.5% CAGR, which is the fastest in Southeast Asia and among the fastest globally. And basically between 2019 to 2022, it's essentially been pegged as being one of the fastest growing economies in the world. GDP growth versus its peers within the region, 9.3% versus Indonesia, which is 5.1%, which is obviously quite interesting. So yeah, so I don't know what else we want to talk about on that country.
Herwig did a good job of promoting Vietnam, so
okay.
You sort of seconded it. We get it, and I think all these deserve its own deep dive. We just sort of, going around the houses, the countries at the moment. Can I ask Anand, maybe you could talk about India? we have an India deep dive coming up on the 4th as an example of deep dives. Maybe you could just say a word. Anand, I know you wear different hats. Your India hat now.
Sure. So just as a quick background, I was born in India, lived there till I was 8, lived in Europe after that, and came to the US from 9th grade onward. So I've held 3 accents and a pretty good worldview over the course of that. So I went to India in 2006 in my 20s and just wanted to have a piece of what was happening there, which, you know, it's kind of similar to what's happening now in Vietnam, and it's happened across different Asian countries. And I realized I just took 2 weeks to do a lot of research and try to understand where I wanted to get in. And one natural entry point was real estate. My family has owned real estate in my home state of Bihar for generations. I don't even know how far back. I was restructuring that because I wanted to get the urban growth in Mumbai and New Delhi at the time. And I realized pretty quickly, I need to find somebody I can trust, because I couldn't deal with the local developers. I didn't know what was happening. I needed to stay up to date. And so ultimately I chose my uncle. My uncle's name is Devesh Kumar. He used to be country head of CGS CIMB, which is a Singapore sovereign wealth backed entity in India. He's since then spun out a group called Earnest Investment Partners, which is now majority owned by Incred Capital in India. So he was my entry point, quite honestly, and I ended up investing in a project near where he lived that did phenomenally well. And at the height of that portfolio, I had properties across New Delhi, Pune, Mumbai, Goa, and a bunch of properties in Bihar, where I'm from. And since then we reorganized that. The real estate environment is different today. There was I won't go into the black money, white money situation that existed back in the day, but it was the Wild West in terms of all that. Since then, Modi has come in. I think he's done some very large scale reforms, and he's taken political hits for it, but they're essential for foreign money to trust and enter the country. Including the ability to kind of trace clearly real estate transactions, ownerships, a lot of the concerns that international investors have. So my interest in India is really as an investor, and has been for some time. What I see now opening up, and I was having this discussion, and it's an overlap with what I also focus on. My other focus is in the cannabis space, in particular when it comes to Asia, the CBD space. CBD is a household, word at this point in the US. That didn't happen accidentally, but when the tipping point came about 1.5 years ago, it moved fast, and it became part of everything from pain relief to cosmetics. I think it's a huge market in China and India. We're currently engaged with a company called Asia Horizon out of China. Basically, the supply chain for this industry doesn't really exist today. And I think given the reforms in the US on the legislative side that are coming for the industry as a whole, the world is going to realize that cannabis is here to stay. I'm talking about all of cannabis. CBD certainly is here to stay, and it's federally legal to distribute, etc. So I think China, from a hemp perspective, is a very interesting play. I think India, I'm having conversations already, is going to be a very interesting play, including the active pharmaceutical ingredient industry when relating to CBD. And so pharma has come into this space in a big way with the acquisition of GW Pharma for $7.2 billion off of mainly one drug for epilepsy, which they had done over 500 million in revenues off of over the last couple of years, just based on CBD, by the way. Nothing proprietary. They didn't come up with CBD on steroids or something. They just figured out how to formulate it consistently and secure their supply chain.
I'm using your system of this yellow background.
I noticed it, Mark.
You got to respect the system.
I respect. You need to have the Oscar music. You know, the
No, we're gonna
Oscars music next.
we do, but as you can see that we're gonna have 4 or 5 of these cannabis related. But what's interesting at that we noticed that in the API in the pharmaceutical industry, even though the pricing or cost should be lower in India, China still accounts for 80% of that supply chain, just because it's so mature. As I understood it and understand. Let me switch gears. I know there's some others I wanted to hear from, just a different perspective altogether. We're talking about New York markets not being used, but let's go over to Brazil, where Chris White is sitting, another emerging market, or however you want to describe it today. But you want to describe, Chris, what you're doing in Brazil with an offering, sort of, and where New York doesn't love what you're offering?
Sure, Mark. I'm going to talk about a couple of things, one of which is oil that I actually know something about, and one of which is Brazil. And although I've spent a lot of time in Brazil over the last couple of decades, I would claim no expertise on Brazil. It's a complicated country. Anyway, let's start with a little story. You probably saw that the chief executive officer of Petrobras was sacked a couple days ago, and the stock gave up about 20% of its value. And then a day later recovered about 10%. And I start with this story because the interaction between the oil business and politics in Brazil is part of the story. Right now, the state oil company Petrobras, which has partly been privatized, is in the process of selling substantially all of the onshore oil and gas production in the country. And a big chunk of the oil and gas production in shallow water, in order to redeploy the proceeds into the deeper water subsalt play that I'm sure you've all seen. We have a 50% subsidiary in Brazil with a couple of Brazilian partners that's been doing business here since the very first part of 2000. So for more than 20 years. It's been a very successful business. It's made a lot of money and paid a lot of dividends. This opportunity with Petrobras is a sort of a once in a lifetime thing. And you're either going to get on the boat or you're not. And it's sort of like what happened, if you'll remember what happened in Argentina in the 90s, where a lot of people made a great deal of money, and some people who weren't quite as adroit didn't do very well at all, or a stronger statement called for. And that's what you have right now in Brazil. So we now have closed on one transaction down here, and we have 2 more under contract. And in order to finance the equity portion of this, we're going to take the Brazilian subsidiary public in Brazil, get a listing in Sao Paulo. Because the oil and gas business, as I'm sure you all know, is not in particularly good odor in New York. And it is, with private money or with public money or with debt money, or it hardly makes any difference. But here in Brazil, there is a local perception that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And therefore, there is a lot of interest in participating in that opportunity. So that's what I'm up to. And I think that we have a moment right now where there is, absent any worsening of the pandemic, there is every chance that oil prices are going to be reasonably strong for the next few months. And I trust that we can get this offering off in 60 days or so.
So I'm showing on the screen our Miami conference highlights. I invited Chris to speak in January 2019 and tell us about where he saw oil going. And instead, he spoke about Brazil. But here you are, launching an IPO in Brazil. But we asked you a question: would you put money, if you had 100 million, would you put it in Colombia or Brazil? And you went Colombia.
Oh,
At the time.
That's right. You know, I've always liked Colombia, and I still do as an investment destination, and I prefer it to Brazil, frankly. But things are a little bit different with the oil business than many other businesses, first of all. And second of all, we're lucky enough to have two very good partners here in Brazil who prevent me from making any gringo mistakes, Mark.
Right.
So,
right.
And
let me shift gears to another sort of both market and financial center. Zach Nasser sitting in Dubai. You mind giving your perspective?
Yes, thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Turn on my video. I have a small body with me, but
nice. What's his or her name?
Lula.
Lula. I have a Lola.
Lady.
You have Lula. I have Lola. Well, speaking of Brazil, Lula. But anyways, keep going.
Yep. I remember we talked about having an event where everyone brings their pet or something. Maybe another time. Because of the lockdown back when the lockdown was like more severe.
Fair enough.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll share some things happening here, like in Dubai and the UAE. I'll share some smaller stories as well. So first, one related to Bitcoin. You know, here there's a lot of festivities around Bitcoin. There are conferences and whatnot. But still, some people are willing to speculate. Some aren't, you know, because of, you know, value and culture reasons. And a lot of the families I'm with are more conservative, right, in Abu Dhabi. But mining was an interest, right? Because mining, you're putting in some effort, you know, and getting a return rather than just speculating on the price. So there's been recent interest in, you know, going into mining, Bitcoin mining, that is. Given, you know, what's been happening the last couple of months. Mixed opinions on whether it's a good idea or not, because, you know, we have a lot of institutionally minded people that aren't really with Bitcoin, right, versus other assets. Another interesting thing that's happening is related to pawn shops, right? Like in the US, you know, pawn shops have been there from a long time. They have negative connotation usually. So here there's, you know, a couple of startups like getting into this area where it's like a digital pawn shop of sorts where you could get easy cash for the short term. That's been getting some investment recently. Something else related to the topics yesterday, like pre-IPO deals and secondary, that's been really active here, more so than before. Like personally, this quarter I was involved in like Robinhood and Udemy. These are like common ones, you know, in the prospective IPO list, you could say. So that's growing, and there's an appetite for that. What else? There's interest in divestment. I mentioned that I think in a previous event. A lot of the families here, they all have hospitality, and they all got hit during COVID with that. Not just like in the UAE, they have like international assets. So there's a move towards divesting, you know, so that you're less fixed asset heavy, you could say, and diversifying that way. Finally, on the political side of things, there are new initiatives towards fourth industrial revolution investments. More so because there's a sentiment that a lot of things were just you know, flashy, like a lot of media, but not as much practical progress. So there is a push towards more practical progress in terms of like actually implementing things or investments into companies. So yeah, these are a couple of points I wanted to share. Yeah.
Great.
One question on someone is mentioning the big mobility company. Are you referring something similar to ride sharing, or are you referring to something like AutoX, where it's the autonomous driving technology? Because I know AutoX is like a huge one that ended up moving to China after its origin in the US. I think it
was that
I don't know if he's still on. Q1, yes. I think
I'm referring to Didi Chuxing buying Brazil's 99 ride-hailing app. So
okay.
Mobility. So obviously, when Didi goes IPO, we have upside exposure to the rise of the ride-hailing or mobility in general of Brazilian market as well.
Okay.
What do people think of Bolt? That's come across our desk as another chip or two available.
And from what I hear, it's doing extremely well. They just raised, I think, $200 million at $1.8 billion valuation very recently. I think led by a large Canadian pension, if I'm not mistaken, and very close to profitability or just about profitable. So one of the first ones to get there. I think Didi also owns a stake in Grab, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
I think around 8 or 10% as of the 2 rounds ago, at least.
So this one, if you know, we've got this onboarding. This came on the 12th from a fellow Ernst & Young partner who's an active angel investor. So it was taxi mobility, but I have all the extra details. If anybody's interested, I can just connect you. I'm not in any way involved in brokering it.
If I could ask just a quick question, does anybody have any visibility on the Didi IPO, which has been postponed forever?
Should be happening in late Q2 or early Q3.
Excellent. Do you know what kind of valuation they're talking about? Any idea?
For me, as high as possible for me, but I think I'm expecting conservatively 100 bill plus, but usually it pops a lot on IPO. And as you know, in Hong Kong and Shanghai, there hasn't been a lot of major tech listing, say since Tencent. Everyone has gone to NASDAQ. So, Ant was supposed to be the big one, but obviously it was pulled last minute. So I expect DD will be a big one. And there will be a lot of demand for homegrown tech, big tech being listed in greater China market. So I expect the pop will be big, but again, you never know these things until the IPO happens. So.
Yeah. No, I've got to push back. I've got a client in there.
Do you want to say something, Jeff?
Oh, I thought I heard that DD is getting pushed back to the second half, but
yeah, I'll think it's second half than Q2, because from JD Logistics, I think apparently it's happening in Q2, right? So I don't think two logistics are gonna clash on the same quarter. That's gonna be.
Yeah, I think Grab is also planning an IPO. The thing is, it depends on where you're getting the information. Management teams are always more bullish on the date versus, if you have a more conservative lens on.
Jeff, you want to? I had you on the panel for a reason, to give your point of view, and I love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. I've spent quite a bit of time now here in Seoul, Korea. And it's been a great, homecoming of sorts. Korea has, I think I recently saw that it's topped the Bloomberg list of innovative countries again. And those were metrics based largely pre-COVID. And so I would argue Korea is even better positioned now. We've seen some big positive structural changes with the democratization of content. BTS and ping pong were mentioned earlier, but we've seen, food and foodies, as well as Korean movies, dramas, video games also enjoying global market share gains. And we've also seen some big relocations out of Hong Kong to Seoul, including the New York Times. Mercedes-Benz has built one of the largest showrooms here in Korea recently. From what we're doing, we've been very busy. We've been working with a number of Korean investors, both bringing institutional funds to some of the largest pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance funds here in Korea. We've also been working with Korean corporate investors who are looking for new innovations, new technologies, and a great example could be the work we did, facilitating SK Group and their biopharmaceuticals business, a strategic investment into a U.S. biotech venture fund that we've partnered with and know very well. We're working closely with Hanwha Group, one of the other large conglomerates, to introduce them to a DNA-based data storage company that we're invested with. So, yeah, Korea's been very active.
Actually, Jeff, on that, I wanted you to meet Zach Nasser. Zach, this is the Jeff is the Stonehaven rep on that deal. If you remember, we talked about it yesterday.
Yes. Hi, Jeff. Good to meet you.
Zach, good to meet you. And then from a deal perspective out of Korea, one of the interesting deals that fell into our lap recently on the mobility side as well was SK Telecom, which is one of Korea's Korea's dominant mobile phone company. They've spun out their mobility business, which includes TMAP, which is the Google Maps equivalent here. They've gotten a strategic partnership from Uber, as well as a big investment. So they're rolling up those two businesses to be what will be the leading mobility company here in Korea, have a pole position and when ADAS is rolled out here in Korea as well. So lots of exciting things happening up here in Korea.
I remember in 2001 going out drinking with the SK Telecom team. They were trying to access the Russian market or consider it. And I've never seen people.
It was a late night, Mark.
I don't know how they do it. They move very quickly to a happy state and maintain it. Whereas Russians just go happy and sad. But that was the SK Telecom team. But we'll. But if I love teaming up with Jeff on lots of things. So he's got more deals coming out of Korea. Maybe he can
as
even.
well as on the biotech and tech side. Yeah, look forward to building a dialogue, Zach, and Hyoktae as well.
I know that Sherry Witter had to leave, and Anna was supposed to be on, but maybe something came up. And Akshay, do you want to have a word?
We've already heard from the experts. Not sure what I can add, but I can maybe share a couple of war stories from my time in Singapore. And I say that only facetiously because, Amit here has been in a much bigger war in Vietnam. So while I was in Singapore, I worked on at least 3 sizable transactions in Vietnam and several, especially in the infrastructure side in Indonesia. And in Vietnam, in 2 of those, we were hit by foreign investment restrictions. One of them was actually a pharmaceutical distributions business. And we spent about 12 months trying to restructure around these restrictions, but no legal structure was satisfactory, so we had to let that go. And the other one was actually a logistics company that was listed on the Vietnam Stock Exchange. And they were trying to sell at 40 or 50% premium to what it was trading at. And just very difficult to get anything done, get information, etc. But I think that's changed significantly over the last decade. Energy was another great area of interest because of all the countries in Southeast Asia, only Vietnam and Thailand have perhaps the highest quality wind resources. But Vietnam actually, I think, dominates the space. But for a long time, all the PPAs were structured in Vietnamese dong, and there were a lot of issues around repatriation of capital, especially for foreign investors who were investing in US dollars. And only recently, I think I read about 12 months ago or 18 months ago, the first US dollar PPA was granted. So that's, again, a very strong sign. So a lot of good tailwinds there, as I think Herbig was saying, actually. In Indonesia, yeah, Indonesia itself has significantly transformed over the last decade. When I first started working there, it was primarily mining, primarily industrials. But in the last 5 years, it has emerged as a huge market for tech companies to be formed and tech companies to actually evolve. And there's a huge generational shift as well. So a lot of the people that you would encounter on a day-to-day basis would be in their 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of government connections, and trying to hustle in hotel, coffee shops, and whatnot. But nowadays, you see a lot of the younger generation that have just arrived from the US, went to Brown or Harvard or Wharton or USC, Boston University, and they come back and have these brilliant ideas. They've been able to actually, they speak the language, being Indonesians, and they've been able to kind of usher a new age of both investment as well as development, which is quite impressive. And if you look at some of the newer entrants into the Indonesian politics, you'll see the founder of Tokopedia has now become the Minister of Education. So I don't think you would really have a highly educated person as a Minister of Education 10 years ago.
Gojek. I think it's Gojek.
Sorry, Gojek, sorry. Makaram, yes, that's right, sorry. My bad, yeah. So very interesting things happening there. And I'm kind of torn a bit that I've just left Singapore 2 years ago and now I'm in London, where we've got Brexit, which is again quite interesting. Funnily, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. I was just reading the other day that over 1,000 EU financial firms, of different sizes and nature, are actually setting up a London-based office just to continue operating and continue doing business. So yeah, it goes both ways, I think.
Amit made an earlier point, and I do want to actually, I see Maxime is on. I want to talk about Cambodia, where he's sitting. But Amit made the point, and some have this, although Bill Deukler's on, who does our virus updates, that with the US and UK, that they're going to come out of this with vaccinations a lot faster. It's going to give, China's obviously done really well in parts of Asia, but it's going to provide some propulsion and some differentiation. But that's to be seen. Maxime, do you want to? I know you were in transition where you are in Cambodia physically, and then you're also trying to help provide your ed tech skills to a philanthropy initiative. But thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. Maxime, French entrepreneur for last 8 years in Cambodia. I founded a startup, a food delivery startup back in 2013. It was called Meal Temple. So this startup was recently acquired by a fintech company that is from Laos. So we basically we merge resource to create a super app. We spoke of this a lot today. So we have created this app that is called KiwiGo, and I'm still a board member. So this app does mobility, ride-hailing, food delivery, all kind of delivery, and mobile payments. And we target Southeast Asia frontier markets, so Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, where we operate already, and French African countries, so East and West Africa. And so more recently, as Mark said, I'm helping EdTech startup in Cambodia. This is also due to the coronavirus. The pandemic had some big impact on the bottom of the pyramid here. I would say a lot of people went back under the poverty line. I think the number are set to double this year. So I'm giving sometimes, I'm going to Kampong Cham. It's a very remote province where I will help the team of 40K plus, which is an Australian foundation, to onboard kids from 3 to 5 years old on Android tablets so they can learn English with proper education. So because they don't have access to English education in those remote villages. So this is what I do for now. To give you a quick overview of Cambodia, I think it's one of the last Eldorado in Southeast Asia. Yes, the population is small. We have 15 million people right now in Cambodia. 11 of them are already on Facebook. It's a bit like Vietnam, also very entrepreneurial mindset of people. There is good opportunity in the country first because there is no FDI restriction. So foreign business can invest in most of the area without a local partner. That's kind of the only country, I think, in Southeast Asia that provide this facility, at least for the frontier markets. To give you also an example of what's going on in the e-commerce. So last year in 2020, the total transaction for e-commerce went up to $170 million. So it's a very small market still. That's for e-commerce, and it's projected to grow by 21% this year, so to a little bit north of 200 million. So this not include, of course, on-demand services like mobility and stuff. Cambodia is also last 5 years. So the real problem for me as a young entrepreneur in Cambodia when I started my startup was access to finance. So basically, when you are a foreigner, you cannot have a local loan in the bank. And also there was no venture capital at the time where I started. So now the venture capital market is kind of growing. We have seen firms, we have seen more than 10 firms entering the market last 5 years. And Startup 500 entered this year also. They opened a branch. They have an investment in Cambodia also since 3-4 years, Mediaload. So there is good opportunities in Cambodia, mostly on the real estate sector. That was the main investment. We receive a lot of investment from China, Prince Group, and now the infrastructure is growing also. There is 3 airports under construction. We have the first highway that is linking Phnom Penh, the capital, to the dry port. So yeah, Cambodia as a country, I would say big opportunities. It's a difficult market in terms of risk, of course, because of the political risk. But it has, I believe, it's still the time to set the first foot, and within the next 5 to 10 years, I believe the investment will show great returns.
Great. I see Eddie Vanderpart has joined, who can talk about Europe. But first, any questions on Cambodia? Does anyone have any experience from those in Vietnam going over to Cambodia or otherwise? Hervig, Amit, no Cambodia?
Sorry, no. My only experience in Cambodia is running a half marathon in Angkor Wat a few years ago. As an investment area, it's usually been an economy that's just far too small to be interesting from our investors' perspective, but certainly one to keep an eye on.
Fair enough.
For me, I support a philanthropy over there called Caring for Cambodia, which is educating kids. You probably are familiar with it, Maxime.
Yeah, I know the Karen communities, and I heard of the NGO. Cambodia is a #1 country for NGOs, I believe also. They have this particularity.
Good. I'm
Mark and Maxime. Maxime, I want to introduce my brother-in-law, Gil. He's been an investor in Cambodia for 10 years, connected with the king and backed by Israeli universities for agriculture.
Okay. I may have met him in the past.
Great. Good stuff. So, Eddie, we've talked about almost every Asian country. We maybe didn't talk about the Philippines or Australia. And we found that some people said, well, no one's going to London. And then Amit stood up for London, and so did Akshay to some extent. You're wearing different hats. But, you could talk a bit about, Europe and then what you're doing, if you don't mind.
So that's a lot of ground to cover, guys.
Yeah, well, you can do it.
I'll tell you what the couple deals we're looking at the moment. Maybe that's of interest. There are two deals in Germany that we're looking at. One on the AgTech space, an AgTech e-commerce platform, which would be the first one of its kind. Which is very interesting, and then a battery technology company, and not the EV battery technology where people poured 8 billion in last year, but stationary battery technology, which is very exciting and at least as big a space and gets much less attention for some reason. But I think this might be a breakthrough technology. If it is, you'll hear from me. And then we look at Spain, we look at a couple of solar plays, both just solar development projects, which is completely, as they say, backed by dope demand, but also a solar sort of pick and shuffle trackers. We look at a tracker company that does a lot of good work and potentially has superior technology to the current incumbents, which is very interesting. In the UK, we look at an AdTech company together with Akshay, which we have now a very favorable and profitable relationship with. Akshay, thank you again. I know Rich, thank you yesterday. And that is all in the impact space where we are trying to make a foray into.
Excellent. That sounds like everyone says Europeans aren't innovating. It sounds like they are. You're finding them.
Yeah, there's a ton of connectivity there. I'm sure that Amit and Akshay can both tell you that, and other people on the call.
Of course.
Absolutely, no doubt there.
So at this point, I just sort of like we did yesterday, going around the houses, what people are saying, thinking, or questions you may have. The theme doesn't have to be only ex-US, but just happens to be. I think it's important to get outside the US. I mean, Todd, you hit every single country mentioned here and more. I know you want to talk about secondaries. Any country you think is overlooked that we should be thinking about?
Well, one country that we really didn't talk about today, where I'm pretty active, is Africa. There's an enormous gap between the friends and family round and so call that pre-seed to seed round, and a Series A round, and you've got a lot of players coming in trying to put money into Africa. So you can get in at very low valuations and be taken out at very high valuations, and still it's at the below the Series A level. So there's an organization down there based out of Cape Town called Launch Africa, which is a VC firm, and is pretty interesting. I mean, I'm invested with them. What I like about the structure, it's a very clever structure. It's out of Mauritius, but the fund has only got a 5-year life. It's a 2-year investment period and a 5-year life, and any investor in it has the ability to invest no fee, no carry in any particular deals in the fund if they want to do so. So if anybody's interested in talking to them, you know, I've got no economic interest in it at all. I'm just a passive investor, but he's doing a great job.
Yeah, we didn't have Africa. We had it represented for a couple of people, and we will do an Africa deep dive that's poised. That's
Mark, this is Herwig.
Yeah, Herwig.
Actually, on Africa, it's I mean, there's two countries actually, or two important countries we didn't look at that we are currently quite exposed to, which is both Africa and Russia. And both of them are, you couldn't be further out of favor, and you couldn't find deeper value. I mean, value investing is obviously as out of favor as it possibly could be, but it seems to be turning a little bit right now. I agree with Todd that Africa represents tremendous opportunity. I don't know about the private markets, but in the liquid markets, pretty much anyone that was big in the past has disappeared. So a lot of foreign investors have left the field, and yet last year liquidity in those markets was better than it was in the past, because there is a new phenomenon going on in the African continent, which is that because of low interest rates around the globe, now also in Africa you have low interest rates, and so the local people, instead of putting money in saving accounts, which do not yield anything anymore, have now started to invest in their own companies. And then, like everybody, I believe everybody knows by now that Africa is making sort of this quantum leap, has moved to smartphones directly, and so is dealing with a lot of the systemic problems that Africa had in the past by you know, making people more informed. So anyway, long story short, you can buy cheap with companies that are growing still fast, that are running extremely professionally, that are having no corporate governance issues. And so as and when this growth obsession or tech obsession, I should say, stops or diminishes, I think value investing is going to come back. And then you can find value, whether it's Africa or Russia. Indeed, I mean, Russia, the dividend yields for extreme quality companies is just unheard of. I mean, it's brilliant. And there are very good managers. You don't need to do it yourself. I mean, we have no economic interest, like Todd said, but in Russia, there's a Swedish group called Prosperity Capital. They've been around for 24 years. They've outperformed anything you ever looked at. I mean, it's easy. You know, you can reach these guys. They're 4 billion in AUM. They've been around since '96, lived through every single Russia crisis. It's awesome.
Well, I spent 8 years in Russia, and I'm not investing in Russia. But having said that, I'm sure that the dividend yields, you could have an allocation for it. I'm helping more Russians invest outside. That's my value add to the Russians.
Okay.
But anybody can do what they want to do.
But Jeff, I've seen their stuff. I know the team. That they've done a brilliant job.
Yeah, Prosperity is an activist, you know, activist investor. I think they've done a great job, honestly.
Greg, did you want to speak? Because you're probably investing in VJ too, or you're on mute. VJ, you had your hand up first. Sorry, you want to speak to Africa or which subject?
Just very quickly on Africa. Apologies, just been working on one or two things, so been dipping in and out of this conference. I just messaged Todd. Just very quickly, I work on public-private sector partnerships, as Mark knows. Two sectors which we're working enthusiastically is agriculture. Africa will be the breadbasket for most of Europe and the world as we go forward, from bananas to coffee. We're doing a lot of stuff in coffee in South Sudan, and we're also doing a lot of stuff in pharmaceuticals, doing a lot of sort of medicines on the ground in Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, to potato farming in Kenya. It's not an easy market. Maris Capital is one of the funds I'm working with. You have to have a lot of strong stomachs, a lot of money up front to overcome, various ministers knocking on your door. But it is a viable market, and as you know, and the telecoms market is huge, as you guys have rightly pointed out. Infrastructure can be a bit difficult, especially when it comes to doing sort of the cost share agreements, and a lot of infrastructure will need the World Bank and the big financial institutions backing the loan agreement. So, I'm here to help, can give you loads of insights on the ground on what's going on, but it's nice to see you guys tackling some of the issues. And I'll be updating you guys on the stuff I'm doing with the University of Bahrain and the government of Bahrain and UAE as we go forward. Mark, apologies for not getting your videos back to you. I'll keep quiet. Thanks a lot.
You're gonna do the 2022 video at this point. It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Greg, do you want to add a point?
Not investing in Russia was interesting. Is that an active decision, or you're not investing in Russia for other reasons?
I was probably a little too heavy on that, but just I know enough. Put it that way.
Fair enough.
8 years in Russia.
Fair enough.
8 winters. But I guess if something's completely discounted, it's got value if you can invest that way. But who else hasn't had a chance? I know, Frank, you're going to be on the 5G discussion soon. You want to, lend some merit to the, the case for Europe. Frank was a former Deutsche Telekom senior executive.
Yeah, so I mean, that's obviously a totally different topic to what I heard today. And by the way, an awesome session. Thanks to everybody for sharing the insights. I'm still stunned. Yeah, so Mark, obviously we will have a 5G session, which is a little bit shedding light on what is mystery and what is reality. And I personally believe that's necessary, because the buzz is extremely high, and it's too high on that topic. And in the end, we will figure out, hopefully in that session, where are the opportunities, the real opportunities to invest and to go into. And I think, Mark, that will be end of March probably, and it should be a good event.
It will be. Do you have any particular insight you want to share? Maybe demythicizing 5G or something else on Europe?
Well, I would. Now you surprised me a bit. There is, so what happens in Europe? Everybody's talking 5G, but it's elaborating very slowly. And what is even more important, the ecosystem around is developing very slowly. So all the startups who are developing the apps which should fire basically the business around 5G. So right now, I think it's more or less a connectivity solution with a few nice features, but the rollout is still very slow. So I would need much more time to say a few words around it. I would watch probably from an opportunity perspective. That's what I feel, that the first real sexy applications are around augmented reality, because that can be in the advertisement space where there's a lot of budget around. I'm personally not a big believer in autonomous driving, in Europe at least not, also due to regulatory things. Technically, it's close to ready, the same as with drone flying, but I'm personally not a big believer. But I think augmented reality is something which might make sense, and this is where the greatest progress can be seen.
Great. And you'll have a more nuanced attempt or opportunity when we go for the deep dive.
Absolutely.
Who else? I see Vlad Zabalin. Maybe you could speak to your perspective. You're sitting in London. You're also involved with in the beverage sector or some of the other sectors. Welcome that. And/or Julia, some of the boards you're on. Go ahead, Vlad.
Yeah, hi. Just to give, the pandemic was quite a strong hit, especially on what we call on-premise consumption, HoReCa, bars and restaurants, and hospitality. Where in certain markets the revenues plummeted to zero. while in off-premise supermarkets and shops, in some markets the sales were up 30% with a thinner margin, of course, but still. So what I expect is a rebound of the market when the restrictions are lifted, and China looks absolutely great. But not for Australia, because the Australian wines have been hit by the customs discussion. But anyway, Chinese market looks great. American market, the US, still the biggest and most lucrative market. New brands and new categories still welcome. Not sure about the big public
including by the way CBD. I wanted Nan to connect with you on that.
CBD is a little bit different category. CBD infused drinks. It's a new and interesting category, but very, very small. And I would predict that it will be growing very fast, but still the alcohol market and beverage market will be dominated by traditional categories. But still, it's extremely lucrative and interesting. But it requires some consumer education whether and why CBD infused drinks are okay. But all in all, I think in terms of investing, I think even before the pandemic, the multiples were absolutely skyrocketing, and the M&A market was very hot. Now we see that it didn't go down, so there is no correction, and it performed quite well, especially in public markets. But still, there are some niches and interesting categories investor can tap in.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else with an insight of our theme this two-day conference? A lot of good insights. Duncan, Julia, Amy, Mark Jarvis. Mark Jarvis not going to the bars and restaurants probably accounted for a
Yeah, I mean, mine's a very domestic view because I only really work with UK companies. But I'd echo one of your earlier speakers about, I don't know whether it's an ostrich approach, a blinkered approach, but the businesses, the bigger businesses are still doing well. We've obviously got this huge furlough pent-up demand in the UK. We'll have to see how that unwinds, but we may be swimming blindly down the wrong tributary, but everything just looks like normal at the moment. It's a very strange feeling.
Duncan, I see you've come on.
I've been listening. I just was multitasking. No, that was an interesting show. The question is specifically relating sort of to the UK. Is that the? I know it's been good because I sold my house over there last month after 3 years. So I'm patting myself on the back for getting a better price and a better sterling rate. We'll see. I think it's going to get kind of euphoric over there. I mean, first of all, everybody loves waking up in the spring in the UK, right? There's no better time than sort of April in the UK heading into June. And I think I can't believe that isn't going to just create a really good atmosphere. And they've got the virus taken care of. I mean, I could see the UK having outperforming almost everybody over the next 6 months. But I still can't get past the whole special relationship thing. It's just not nearly as special as it was. And even look at Biden. He's sitting there. He's got to deal with Europe, and he doesn't have somebody that knows how to communicate with Europe playing the foil for him. And I don't know. I mean, I can't see how it isn't a GDP negative for the UK long term. I agree with the comments earlier about smart people, well-educated people picking where they want to live in Europe, and a lot of them will still choose London. But in the way the whole Brexit thing was supposed to help the rest of the country, and what they've probably done is actually hurt the rest of the country. I mean, I don't know how you're going to all of a sudden compete on manufacturing, and I don't know. It's like, this is,
it's
I'm
okay.
kind of
We don't manufacture anything, so it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. So no, I mean, the U.S. is trying to do it too, right? I mean, everybody's trying to manufacture stuff at home, right? It's just, but you know, it seems like there's this move to try to be less efficient because of sort of, you know, populist approaches, right? I mean, it's probably works better in the US with 320 million people than it works in the UK for 60 million. I mean, I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but I mean, just, you know, it just seems to me it was pretty good when you were, you know, having a big say in 450 million people's, you know, with Europe, and you lose that place, and you're trying to, I don't know, just it's a weird one. It's a strange one.
So Simon, we're sort of in the town hall. I just saw you jump on. Everyone's just sort of sharing their insights. Duncan was echoing. See, people are bullish on the UK, although Duncan's a little sanguine.
Bullish short term, sanguine longer term.
Right.
I have a question for our colleagues from Europe. Here out of Asia, the picture is that it's basically, I mean, that 2020 is considered as the kind of watershed moment when literally Europe lost it. A couple of weeks ago, Nikkei published an article by William Breton, The End of European Influence in Asia. Last year, I saw a headline in Singaporean press, the end of the myth of European competence. What's happening there? What is your feeling on the ground?
All the Europeans are going off camera right now.
What's happening to the old continent? Should we go back or not?
I'm leaving that to the Europeans. Although, Rainer, you're sort of a transplant into the US. Anybody want to take that? You're taking that, Vijay?
Yeah, I think, look, you know, when you talk about Europe, you really have to distinguish various parts of Europe. Unfortunately for us in the UK, Brexit and the COVID death rate and the level of cronyism that's going on and the money going out and not coming in, the fishing industry, the looking towards Asia to pick up slack manufacturing, and as Mark rightly pointed out, and Duncan, we're not really a manufacturing industry. If you take mainland Europe, there's a different scenario. I mean, France and Germany are all suffering from COVID, this inefficient lockdown, unlike New Zealand and Asia, everyone's carrying on. We in the UK are probably looking at another round of lockdowns and, you know, huge unemployment is coming to Europe. Certain sectors in Europe will survive. Others, like the hospitality industry, are out. Airlines are suffering. So, you know, Europe, I mean, we're looking to Asia to learn from the lessons that you have from, you know, from New Zealand to Australia. But in terms of GDP growth and everything, I think mainland Europe is a lot more healthier because, you know, that's what the European Union was supposed to be supposed to be for.
Rainer, you've come on camera. You want to share perspective?
Yeah, I'll keep on.
You're on mute though, Rainer.
Right. Yeah. It's I don't know. I mean, it's really I think a matter now of how things will get back on track. But I have to say that I'm certainly been very disappointed in the way many European countries have handled COVID. And I mean, Germany has done initially a good job, but now it seems to be not doing a good job. I grew up in Switzerland. Switzerland was terrible. I mean, it's just it's very strange to see how badly they've been able to handle that crisis, and that certainly now raises questions about how other things will be handled moving forward. And for sure, the impact on certain industries now has been very severe. think on the other hand, I mean, when we look at companies which are manufacturing things and services which are not linked to hospitality and so on, have still been able to operate quite well. So I think it's not dead. It's not the end of it, but there's certainly an issue there, at least in the short term. And I think that the bigger issue as well is, how well does the European Union function? And that's still a little bit of a question mark as well. So we'll have to see how this experiment continues. But it's still, more than a 400 million inhabitant market, and it's not going away. So I think that it will more also be a question of how the new generations, will drive this forward. And I think I'm more hopeful there than with the current generations.
So I will wait with getting a Singaporean passport then, see how it develops.
Anyone else on that question? I'm also curious how you in Asia view us in the US.
Priscilla came back. She just said they've signed everything. I'm just writing her an email back.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
Duncan, I'm going to mute you.
Sorry.
I mean, maybe it wasn't Europe's finest hour, so to speak, but how do you view the US coming out of the Trump era? I guess that's for you, Marius, or anyone in Asia.
Okay, I'm not sure if I can count as an Asian, but
well, you can echo what you're hearing.
I think that at least when I look at I checked. I'm reading quite often Indonesian press, and they say nothing is gonna change. And interestingly, the comments from China were very similar. It wasn't that, oh, our man has won, so everything's gonna improve in terms of relationship. The best comment I read was Biden's gonna be more predictable than the previous president. So nothing much is gonna change. I mean, there is a big disappointment with the West in terms of not being able to get the virus under control, that's for sure. Here in Singapore, we have a couple of infections a day, literally. I mean, they kill the economy, and definitely tourism suffers. In Changi Airport, one of the best airports in the world, you have 2% of the passengers you had a year earlier. But in terms of infections, they are very low. So 2020 was definitely the year when the whole West lost to China.
Yeah, I was looking at the stimulus of different forms. It's been anywhere between 40 and 50, 60% of GDP all the way to Japan, but China is 20%. So they had to spend less to keep their economy going, and they're getting out faster.
Yeah, I believe Westerners, both in Europe and in the US, will have to really rethink certain things, ask themselves certain very uncomfortable questions.
That's okay. We should. Some people ignore them or put them under the rug. We've been talking about a lot of it, including our own issues with infrastructure and all the rest. Anyone else for good and order? I was going to also offer a break. Those who want to, just so you know, the rest of our day, if you can see it on the calendar, on Wednesdays, those who are involved being strategic advisors, because we always say that the families are looking for deals, capital, talent, and then philanthropic synergies. And the talent side is where we have about 75 strategic advisors, CXOs, thought leaders, that we want to connect up into the families more systematically. And 10:30 is when if you look at your breakout rooms, I'm not sure I've got them all open, but if I open them, you'd see a number of rooms. In fact, I'll open them just so you could see. if you scroll down, you'll see E for the events that are coming up for coordination of those events, and then just other rooms that people can jump into. And it's tougher for those in Asia, obviously for our 1030s, but I would make 2 points on the calendar is that we're going to move to a 6 a.m. start for day 2s of our conferences. So it'll be a lot easier for those in Asia. And the next one would be on April 27th, because the 24th, we're not going to have a second day. It's more an impact. April 27th, May 26th, June 30, July 28th, 6 a.m. starts. And I get up at 4 a.m., so I'm always up if people want to talk. And then November is actually going to be New York, 3 days, 16th, 18th, but we'll have parallel venues, including Singapore, and Dubai, Tel Aviv, Sao Paulo, as you can see, and my home, Columbus, Ohio. So that's as we look forward. So if there's nothing else, I mean, I'll stick around here. We got people coming on the strategic advisor front, but if one thing that you should know is if you look to the right of the screen, there's what's called in process, and then on deck and on calendar. So if there's something you want to see, maybe we had the future of UK and Europe, where Mark Jarvis and Eddie Vanderpart, that being a subject to go into, but all those other subjects moving into the on decks. Private credit, Ilya is sitting in Monaco with the Russian family office. That's going to be coming together very nicely. 5G, we're going to, as you saw, Frank, we'll put that on the calendar. The Biden administration agenda, which can have international dimensions. Africa, which was mentioned. Simon Vines, also behind the future of work. Part 3, fintech again. There's up here already. There's a VC. There's India VC AgTech Cannabis coming up as well. Impact, as I said. Space. Esther Dyson is now getting us involved. She's a frontier space investor. So that's it.